Welcome back to the Farmhouse. I'm Stephanie Spiker.
I'm Candace Worsbowski.
We're back with another episode of the Farmhouse after taking a little break. Thank you all for listening. Today we're excited to have Lindsey Shapiro with us at the Farmhouse. Lindsey's a first-generation farmer who runs a small, diversified vegetable operation in southeastern Pennsylvania, and she's also the Farm Bill campaign organizer for Pasa Sustainable Agriculture. And we're going to hear all about that, but first, hopefully you guys listened to the roundtable episode we did with some of the other ladies of Lancaster Farming, and we talked about some of the things that we learned from working here. So it's been about a month, and I feel like even in that month, Candace and I have learned some new stuff, so we're going to share it with you.
We learn something every day.
Every day.
So, yeah. And we're all big fans of continuous learning here at Lancaster Farming. So yeah, like Steph said, we decided we would share a couple of things that we've each learned since we last published an episode. So I'm going to start out by saying that I got some advice about gardening in the fall from our story, Don't Clean Up Your Garden Beds Until Spring. Here's why. So I enjoy gardening. I've talked about that on this podcast before. But the truth is that by this time each year, I'm not quite burned out, but let's just say I am in the need of a little break. So it's usually kind of a lift for me to actually put my garden to bed for the winter. But according to this story, I don't actually have to, because it turns out that letting your garden kind of go for the fall and the winter is a great way to support your backyard wildlife, which I love. So I get to be lazy about gardening in the fall while also giving a home to insects and food for birds in my backyard. And that is a win-win that I can absolutely support.
Oh, I am all for less effort when it comes to your yard and garden. So I love that.
Less effort, more pollinators. Where's that t-shirt?
Oh, I was going to say, that should be our slogan. So one of the things I got to do during our little hiatus, I went out to Ohio for the Farm Science Review, and I got to learn about all the different uses of AI in farming, and wrote an article called Artificial Intelligence Can Reduce Farming Inputs. And the thing that was super interesting to me was how you can use AI to target weed spraying. So basically, it senses only weeds and sprays herbicides only on weeds instead of just doing a general spraying. And according to John Deere, it can result in 60% less herbicide use, which is great for farmers' wallets and for the environment. So yeah, that was really interesting. I also got to learn about hydroponics from a woman named Amanda Bennett, who, a little teaser for you, that's who you're going to hear from next week, actually. So tune in next week to learn more about hydroponics.
Very cool. You know, I'm kind of two minds with AI, and I feel a lot of people are in the same boat where it's very cool, some of the stuff that we can do with it, but it also is slightly troubling, some of the things that we can do with it. I also recently learned that to generate one AI image, it uses the same amount of energy as it takes to charge your phone to full battery 3 times over.
Wow.
So something else to consider.
That's a little concerning, actually. That's
something to think about.
Well, there we go. There's so many things we can learn. Go to lancasterfarming.com. You will learn something new every day too, I promise. But now we're going to talk with Lindsey Shapiro. She is the Farm Bill campaign organizer with Pasa Sustainable Agriculture. And she also has a farm called Root Mass Farm. It's in Berks County, Pennsylvania, and it's a vegetable farm that she runs with her husband. So yeah, let's get Lindsey into the farmhouse and hear all about the Farm Bill and her veggie farm and all the cool things she's doing.
Well, Lindsey, welcome to the farmhouse. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
So did you always want to work in agriculture?
I didn't. I'm not even sure I still do. No, I didn't always want to work in agriculture. I am a first generation farmer. So my husband and I started Root Mass Farm in 2011 on leased land after having been living in Philly for about 5 years. So I had graduated from college in 2006, and I was kind of, finding some coffee shop jobs and that sort of thing. And then we were in the depths of the Great Recession, and I had been working at a small business development nonprofit at the time. And my position there was grant funded. I was like an AmeriCorps Vista. And so that was kind of coming to an end, and I was looking out into the future and wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to spend my time. And the idea of having another job that required me to sit at a desk for most of the day and write emails and sit in meetings wasn't super appealing. I was in my like mid-20s at the time, and um, my then boyfriend, now husband and farm partner, had been working at an urban farm in Philly in the Germantown area. And I would go up there on Fridays and help with their harvest and their afternoon farmers market. And I was just so enamored with the tangible joys of growing food. And we'd harvest the food Friday morning, we would wheel it out onto the sidewalk Friday afternoon, and it would end up in people's dinners by Friday evening. So just the transparency of that was really appealing to me, and I could work hard and see the fruits of my labor in a really obvious way. And after that, I was just kind of hooked. So 2009 or so, I think we, started saving with the hope of someday being able to start up our own farm operation. And then I guess it was maybe early 2010, we are connected with some landowners in Berks County in the Ole area who had this property, and they wanted to see some young farmers kind of take it over and manage it in a kind of a sustainable way, and didn't want to have a lot of involvement in the day-to-day operation, but they had a good amount of infrastructure in place, and it was almost like a turnkey operation. And so it was such a incredible opportunity that even though we weren't quite sure that we were ready to take the leap, we decided that, it was too good of a opportunity to pass up. So we started preparing the land and the residents on site in 2010 and moved out in 2011 to start our farm. So it has been kind of a long journey, but one that has always been informed by just a love for food and a love for feeding people and an appreciation for how tangible the work is.
Yeah. That's awesome. And a great opportunity too, because we have heard, so many times how difficult it is for young farmers to find land to farm.
Tell us a little more about Root Mass Farm, which is your farm now.
Yeah, so we are a diversified vegetable farm. So we grow a whole mix of vegetables, probably, 40 different types of vegetables. And within that, maybe over 100 different varieties. Mostly because, variety is one of the key tenets of kind of sustainability. And you want to make sure that you have a very diversified operation, because you never know what pest or disease or weather-related issue is going to come knocking that season. So yeah, having a lot of diversity is kind of one of the ways that we've tried to make our business viable and sustainable. So grow lots of different things, and we sell through 2 farmers markets in Philadelphia. We have a small market-based CSA, so it's like a debit style CSA where people pay at the beginning of the season, they shop at the market, and then we just deduct from their balance as the season goes on. So it appeals to a lot of folks that are looking for some flexibility in their CSA, or they're a smaller household, or they like to go to the shore a lot, which totally respect that, and don't necessarily want to have a once a week commitment. So we have that CSA pickup option at both of our farmers market locations. And then we do just a small amount of wholesale business, but the bulk of our sales comes from our 2 Philadelphia farmers markets.
So yeah, you already mentioned your CSA program, which I am kind of fascinated by because it's set up a little differently than I think most CSA programs are. So yeah, you've already explained it a little bit, but can you explain a little more how your CSA program works and why you chose to organize it this way versus the kind of more traditional way?
Back when we were living in Philly, Landon was taking a class called Exploring the Small Farm Dream, which is offered by Penn State Extension. And I think it's like a 6-week in-person course, at least it was back in the mid 2000s. And it talked about all different small farm business structures and models. And this CSA was actually something that came up during that course. There was a farmer in Maine who is in some sort of video that they were screening during the class who was talking about the CSA model. And for us, when we are starting this venture without any familiarity with the land, I had, absolutely no farming experience aside from helping out a few hours here or there at the Germantown farm. So there were a lot of unknowns, and we didn't really feel confident in our ability to gauge how much we are going to produce in that first season, or even the first 3 seasons. And so, but we like the idea of having a community of members as part of our farm, having some of that early season income that a CSA is really critical for providing. So yeah, we decided to just steal the model that we had learned about in the Small Farm Dream course and create this kind of debit style system. And so we have 3 levels. And so you can start with $150 in your account, $300 or $500, and then we give you a bonus tied to the size of your initial contribution. So if you put in $300, for instance, then you have $345 to spend with us. So it's a way of acknowledging and thanking our customers for that early and big investment in our farm at the beginning of the season. So, in a traditional CSA model, you'll have some weeks where you'll get to kind of share in the bounty by getting like extra tomatoes or extra peppers, whatever it may be. And so our model doesn't really have like a good mechanism for that sort of like bonus structure for CSA members, but the monetary bonus kind of helped us replicate that part of the CSA. And anything left over in somebody's account will roll over to next season. And so there are ways that we've structured it that I think if we were to do it again, maybe we'd walk it back a little bit. But it's really been a great way to have, consistent customers and reliable income in February and March when we're not doing farmers markets, but we're spending a lot of money buying a lot of seeds and germination mix and fertilizers and all the things that we're going to need for the season to come. Our CSA is able to help us cover those costs until we start earning revenue again.
Yeah, I kind of love that idea for a CSA. We've talked before about neither of us are part of a CSA currently, and we both have different reasons, but I feel like the way yours is structured would actually help both of us because for me, it's because I come from a household of picky eaters. Mm-hmm. So the idea of food going to waste because whatever we get for that week might not be something that we're going to eat in my family has kept me away from CSAs. And I know for Steph, it's because you come from a smaller household, so you also don't want food going to waste. Yep. But yeah, I like that model.
Yeah, that is, if I was closer to Philly, I would absolutely.
So we did actually have one customer that had lived in Philly, been a CSA customer forever. They first found out about us at this event called the Philly Food and Farm Fest. That doesn't exist anymore, but it was really fun. And they moved out to the suburbs. They moved to Norristown. And they're like, we really don't think we can do the CSA anymore, but if we get enough members in our area, would you consider doing a drop-off? So we actually have, this year was the first year that we're trialing it. They'll put pre-orders in with us through our Google form, and then we put their orders together, and there's like 4 households, and we just drop off their CSA orders. So all that to say, if you can get enough neighbors to join in, then find a Lancaster drop-off option.
All right, so what do you wish more consumers would understand about what goes into farming produce?
Oh gosh. I think that's a great question. I think just how labor intensive it is, like we are at a scale where we're hand picking all of our string beans, and, that's going to be like a hot job with a lot of bending over. It's not one that actually our employees like to do. So Landon and I, my husband and I, are like the principal bean pickers because it's just we don't want to like create that ill will from our employees by making them pick all the time. And so it's just it's a lot of work. And so then when people see the price on the beans and they're like, this is what you're charging for beans? And it's like, well, this is the cost of me waking up at 5:30 in the morning before I had to get my kids ready for school so that I can go out and pick beans and then come in and make lunches and do camp drop-offs and all those things. So yes, like that, the price of beans reflects, all the labor that goes into them and, the amount of impact that it has like on our schedules and on our day. So I think that the labor intensive work of growing vegetables is something that I wish people understood more. And then I think, the imperfection is a consumer education piece that feel like would go a long way in helping all of us. Just, that strawberries come in all different sizes. And just because a strawberry is not huge and glossy doesn't mean that it's not going to be delicious. And in fact, it probably will be more delicious. And just, willingness to kind of trust the farmer's assessment of their produce and be willing to purchase it, even if it's even if it's a little smaller than they would expect or misshapen or has a few blemishes on it. Just having a little more tolerance of something that isn't going to be, in a magazine. I had a customer that was like, "Why is this celery so small?" And I was like, "Well, we're like harvest our celery a little bit earlier because it's been so dry that we haven't really been able to get it to size up very much. But this is the time of year where we would be counting on that income from celery sales. So we're harvesting our celery. It's a little bit on the small side, but it's going to be delicious. It's going to have a lot of flavor. It's still going to make your potato salad or your soup just like sing with celeriness. So just having a little bit more faith in the farmers' decisions and what they put on their market table or in the CSA box, or to send to their retail location, I think would be very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So you use a lot of practices that would probably be considered like natural or regenerative or kind of whatever buzzword you want to use in that scenario. But most of them that I was looking at on your website, I'm fairly familiar with at least. But the one that really stood out to me was you said you use radishes to improve drainage, which I have never heard of. So how does that work?
Yeah, so we will sometimes use, especially at our old property. So over the course of our farm's life, we've actually been on two sites now. But on our old property, it was the drainage and that soil was really poor. And so we are using a lot of tillage radishes, which are a cover crop that people use over the winter and to break up compaction in the soil. So it's basically just a big old daikon radish. And so, they get to be maybe like 2 to 3 inches in diameter and they grow 10 inches deep or something. And so they basically like drill a hole into the soil to and they have roots that go down to help basically like aerate the soil and help the water move through. So yeah, we try to be varied in our cover cropping in the same way that we try to be varied in the cash crops that we grow, because different types of roots, different depths of roots, different like biomass and ecology of different plants is going to have different impacts on the healthier soil. And so the more that you can, I think, kind of keep the soil covered and keep the soil, what's happening above the soil, diverse and varied, helps keep things below the soil also diverse and varied, which are just going to lead to healthier crops in the long run.
That's very cool and creative. Cool. I like that. Okay, so aside from working on your own farm, you also work with Pasa. Can you explain for those who aren't familiar what Pasa is?
Sure. Yeah. So Pasa is a farmer-serving nonprofit. We're based in Pennsylvania, but have farmers that we work with throughout the whole mid-Atlantic and like Maine to South Carolina. Most of our staff is based in Pennsylvania, and we do a number of sort of like farmer-centric programming. So we do farm-based research. We have our soil health benchmark study and our financial benchmark study, where farmers are actually kind of citizen scientists and help generate the data that we use to better understand farm finances or soil health. We have some apprenticeship programs, a dairy grazing, a diversified veggie, and a diversified vegetable pre-apprenticeship program, where we're helping to train up the next generation of farmers. And then we do a lot of farmer-to-farmer education, seasonal events. And then probably the thing that Pasa has been known for the longest is our annual conference, which is now in Lancaster every year. I don't want to say it wrong. I think it's February 5th through 8th this year, but it might be different dates. Anyway, we'll double check that. But and so we also do some policy work, which is where my role at Pasa falls. I am the Farm Bill campaign organizer with Pasa, so I get farmers involved in the Farm Bill reauthorization process and make sure that farmers' voices are being heard in spaces where decisions are being made that will impact all of our farm businesses. So yeah, it's a very gratifying job. I get to talk to a lot of farmers in that work and learn more about what their needs are and try to be very solution oriented and figure out, how we can improve policies in this country so that farmers in Pasa's network have a better shot at, doing the incredible work that they want to do, growing good food and protecting the environment and mitigating climate change and creating good jobs. And so, we try to figure out what policies can be put in place to further that end goal. So it's, really grateful to have the work at Pasa. Very grateful also for the health insurance and the dental insurance. I have an 8-year-old that had like a shocking number of cavities. So, it's really nice to be able to have that security. And, so many small farms in Pennsylvania do need off-farm income. And I think ultimately my goal is that we'll figure out how to really structure this business in a way that will allow me to not have to work on farm off, not have to work off farm. But at this point in time, it's really nice to have that stability, especially as we're kind of rebuilding our farm operation from the old location to the new location.
So you've kind of already mentioned your role at PASA as the Farm Bill campaign organizer. What is important for farmers to understand about what's going on with the Farm Bill right now?
Yeah, so I think there are a few big flashpoints in the current Farm Bill debate. So the House Ag Committee has already passed their version of the Farm Bill. The Senate Ag Committee has not yet passed a version of the Farm Bill. There's still, I think, a decent amount of daylight between where the Senate Democrats are and where the Senate Republicans are in terms of figuring out what that version of the Farm Bill should look like. And so it's unclear, whether we'll get a Farm Bill this year. I think most folks are, pessimistic about that likelihood that we'll have a Farm Bill this year. And one of the main flashpoints right now is around nutrition funding. And so there are a lot of commodity growers predominantly in the Midwest, but all across the country that have been struggling with price declines and with increased costs. And so there's a push to improve the commodity title. So the supports that farmers get who grow commodities when there's, market volatility. And in order to do that, the House version of the bill takes some money from the nutrition title. And I think a lot of farmers in Pasa's network are actually direct to market farmers, myself included. And the nutrition title is actually a significant source of revenue for our farms. So there's just a lot of competing needs in terms of, supporting farmers that are growing commodities and who are facing market volatility, and then supporting, the millions and millions and millions of Americans, children included, who are facing food insecurity, and also the farmers who depend on that income from the nutrition title. And there's just not enough money to go around.
Yeah.
So there's, some hard decisions that have to be made. And I think, it's will ultimately come to a matter of priorities. And I think, the priorities that we hear most from my kind of farming peers is that we need to protect nutrition funding. And yeah, one of the other kind of main flashpoints is about the climate smart. They're called the climate smart sideboards. It's all very policy wonky, and it's annoying to talk about because it's just it's not, the narrative hasn't been really constructed, I feel in a way that's easy for people to find themselves in and for it to be approachable. But there's this dedicated pool of funding that's supposed to be for practices that are considered to be climate smart. So, mitigating climate change, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And there are folks within Congress that want to protect that dedicated pool of funding. And then there are other folks that think that that money doesn't need to necessarily go towards climate smart practices. It should go towards other conservation things, other programs. And so there's some debate over, how important should climate change mitigation be in thinking about where we prioritize our conservation dollars.
Sounds complicated to get past, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was just in DC, actually Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week, and it did not feel like a very encouraging trip in terms of people are making progress and figuring out how to navigate some of these roadblocks and disagreements. People hear from their constituents, and so our voices are really ultimately what should be taken into account when these decisions are being made, not necessarily like ag lobbyists and policymakers that don't really have any connection to farming. So if listeners have strong feelings about the nutrition title or about climate smart farming, then making sure that as best you can, taking the time to communicate those needs to the people who are making these decisions, really does make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the Farm Bill is going to impact farmers, so hopefully get your voice heard on where you think the money should be and how it should be. So
yeah. But it's not just going to impact farmers, although farmers definitely need to have a say in this, because the reality is this piece of legislation is gigantic. And, we talk on here about how ag touches everyone's lives, whether you're aware of it or not. So it will impact your life, whether you are involved in farming or not. And we've gotten the sense that a lot of people who are not directly involved in farming, they don't understand the importance of or are even aware of the Farm Bill. Why do you think that they should care about this legislation? Like, what would you say to the average consumer who might be sitting there thinking, Farm Bill, what? Like, this has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, so I think the Farm Bill is one of the major ways that we as a country decide what type of agriculture we want to have in this country. So if you care about your communities having small and mid-sized diversified farms that are investing in value-added products or are doing direct-to-consumer sales, attending farmers markets, having CSAs, like if those are the types of farms that you want to see more of or you want to see continue, then the Farm Bill is going to have a direct impact on the ability of those farms to stay in business and to grow and to continue being, really critical, integral parts of people's communities. So, the Farm Bill is funding things like, conservation programs. It determines access to credit. So when we're talking about new and beginning farmers being able to access the money that they need to purchase land or to get new equipment, the Farm Bill has a stake in what happens in those sorts of relationships. Obviously the nutrition title. And so like if the Farm Bill is a really important piece for making sure that kids in this country don't go hungry. And so for all those reasons, even though it seems like it's, just about crop insurance or something that's not gonna, which is, also very important for the security of our food system. But, it's a matter of, making sure that the farmers in this country are able to continue doing the critical work of both, feeding our communities and feeding the world. And so, that's something obviously that I think everyone needs to care about.
Yeah, absolutely. We all eat, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. So we're going to pivot a little bit. And you've mentioned that you're a first generation farmer, and you say on your website that you sometimes, quote, still feel overwhelmed by all the things you don't know. So do you think that feeling will ever go away? And what do you do to combat those overwhelming feelings when you feel like you just don't know everything?
Yeah, I keep waiting. I feel like I know. Part of it too is that we, so much about farming, especially I think farming produce and farming produce organically is about like understanding your soil and understanding the seasons and having farmed on a property for 11 years and then having to start over on a new property, I feel like that has kind of reset the clock for us, and feeling like we're really getting a handle on our practices and our systems and our variety choices. I mean, there's, some things that have been really easy to just like replicate on the new property, but there are other things that it's just been feeling like we're learning, starting from scratch in terms of how to do this work. And so that has definitely been an obstacle. And so I certainly don't think I'm going to feel like I have a good handle on things anytime soon. But I think in terms of dealing with those feelings of like powerlessness in the face of extreme weather events and the unpredictability of farming, I get a lot of comfort from our customers, actually. We have some like very enthusiastic customers at both of our farmers markets who, talk about like just the moment. I had a moment this summer where I saw somebody like eat a sungold tomato for the first time. And so they had never had a sungold, and they're like, oh, do you mind if I try one? So they picked one out of the pine container and they popped it in their mouth, and they just had that face of pure joy where like your eyes roll back into your head and you're just like, all you can think about is just the joy of tasting something really, really good. And so it's like those sorts of moments where just like, even if we mess up, 700 times this season, which, we're getting close, we're at like 600 or whatever. Having those moments where we get to see the like joy that our food can bring to people has been really critical. I think, also just having an incredible support network. In southeastern Pennsylvania, we are blessed to have so many incredible produce farmers who are like really very community oriented and like want to see each other succeed. We like it's not like I don't feel like there's a very competitive ethos. It's, a really sort of supportive community of growers that are just like all rooting for each other. And so having that network of growers has been really crucial. Farming with Landon, with my husband, when one of us is down, the other one can kind of like come in to try to keep moving things forward. Yeah, and then our kiddos, like we have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old who sometimes hate the farm. But sometimes we get to kind of like see the wonder of it through their eyes, on farm walks, and they spot things that I am, too old and like too cynical to even like notice anymore. And they'll just like, wow, look at that incredible plant, or oh my gosh, that bug. And so being able to kind of see the wonder of this work through their eyes has really like buoyed me in times where I'm like, why are we doing this?
And that's the reason, or at least part of the reason, yeah. So as someone who is a mother, a farmer, you have an off-farm job. How do you juggle all of your responsibilities? What do you do to make sure that you're keeping a positive balance and not overwhelming yourself?
Yeah, I don't know if I do that. I don't think I do a great job of keeping a positive balance and not overwhelming myself. But I think, we always take a good amount of time off during the like winter holidays. And my husband and I both grew up in Massachusetts, and our family is still there. And so like making sure that we spend a good amount of time at home in the winter when like the season is slow, and like really just giving ourselves time to recharge, I think is really important. And then yeah, just being able to, my partnership with my husband is really essential in that way too, in terms of being able to balance everything. He, is like very understanding about when I have to, work after the kids go to bed or something, because we have some sort of grant report due and I have to plug away at the computer, and he'll put the lunches together for the next day or something like that. And so having a very understanding and supportive partner has been crucial in being able to maintain the farm work, the off-farm work, and just being able to continue to make sure our kids have everything that they need, and getting them to dance class and doctor's appointments and the whole slew of and also just being able to pause to spend time with them. Yeah, so because we do a Sunday farmers market, Landon manages the harvest on Saturdays and I do the market on Sundays. And so I hang out with the kiddos on Saturday. He hangs out with the kiddos on Sunday. But it's also, so we don't get a lot of time during the growing season being together, the four of us. And so it's part of the reason that during the winter months, we could do a market all winter, and we could so our Sunday market actually goes throughout the year. We could do a market all winter. We could, change our production model a little bit to make sure that we are able to grow for winter markets. But I think we both just really see the winter as a time to have weekends together, to just go on trips, to sit on the couch and watch football games while we ignore our kids for a couple hours.
That sort of stuff is important.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Super important.
I think people sometimes underestimate the importance of just rest and just taking a break from all of it. So
yeah, we make sure that we even though for it's business wise, it would make sense for us to be able to try to figure out a way to go to markets all winter long and, maintain our presence, maintain the customer base, keep that revenue. I think the quality of life consequences of that has prevented us from going that route.
Yeah, I mean, everyone needs a work-life balance, right? So, yeah. I mean, if that's what works for you guys, then that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you said you didn't think you have a balance, but it sounds to me like you do have strategies in place. It sounds to me like you do.
All right, so that brings us to our final question, which is, what does being a woman in ag mean to you?
Yeah, I guess it's meant different things over the course of my career in ag. Certainly my feelings about it changed a little bit after I had kids. Before I had kids, I instilled the balance of work on the farm. I do a lot of the day-to-day work on the farm, but I don't do a lot of the work with the equipment. I don't do a lot of tractor operation or maintenance of the equipment or those sorts of pieces. But that was even more true before I had kids. But after I had kids and they, were old enough to say things, they started calling the tractors daddy's tractors. And I was like, wait a second.
Can't have that.
I can't have that. And so it really became important to me for my girls to understand that I was just as capable about doing the tractor operation as their dad. And that, they as girls are just as capable of doing things that are traditionally ascribed to as male dominated things. And that they shouldn't, let those sorts of norms dictate how they feel about the world and think about the world. So then I was became much more determined to be a capable tractor operator, and I am still learning, but they no longer call the tractors daddy's tractors, thankfully. And so, I think my experiences and my feelings about being a woman in ag are always evolving, but I am grateful that I have so many incredible role models here in Southeastern Pennsylvania, many of whom have been on your podcast, who have shown me all the different versions of what being a woman in ag can look like. And I will continue to look to them for guidance.
Awesome. I'm glad we're setting good examples.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
for
that.
the next generation.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lindsey, so much for joining us at the farmhouse. It was so great talking to you.
Yeah, both of you as well. Thanks for having me. It's a real treat.
It was so great having Lindsey join us here at the farmhouse. I really enjoyed talking to her, and I was so fascinated by the entire concept of radishes draining soil. Like, it makes so much sense though, because if the soil's compacted and you have this big radish that's really long and has this root system, like it's under the ground. It's in the soil. It's going to break it up.
It's doing the work for you, and then you or someone else is going to get to eat it.
Yeah, that's
it's a
incredible.
Win-win.
Fascinating. And it's like a cover crop in terms of keeping runoff and everything. Like, wow, incredible.
Yeah.
This is such a strange transition, but stick with me, people. There is another vegetable that grows under the ground that Candace and I are both a very huge fan of.
I don't know if you can call it a vegetable.
I'm calling it a vegetable. I don't care what other people say, and that is the humble potato.
Yeah, I think we're both on record about our love for potatoes. Steph certainly is. If you ever want to read a fun column on LancasterFarming.com, there is one that she wrote that's just an ode to the potato.
Yes, there
We
is.
have another column that one of our colleagues, Jeffrey Miller, wrote that is also about potatoes and him interviewing a fictional potato. So
Defending their status as a vegetable, I would like to say.
I think that's questionable, but what's not questionable is the fact that we're all a bunch of potato fans here at Lancaster Farming. But yeah, I'm a fan of potatoes, and the reason we're talking about potatoes now is because something that Lindsey said really struck me, and that was when she talked about the tangible joy of growing food. I just pulled in my potato harvest, and we've cooked them a few different ways, and they have all been so joyously delicious, and not just because they're potatoes, just because it comes with knowing that I grew this, I cared for this plant, and now me and my family were reaping the benefits of it.
Yeah. I mean, there is something about growing your own food that, I don't know, it's like a primal thing, right? So,
Yes.
and I love the way that Lindsey explained that and how it got her into what she's doing now. So.
And I feel like when you're able to support your local farmer, you're getting almost a piece of that, because you are then directly supporting someone who is putting that care in. So it's like you're kind of getting like the secondhand joy of growing your own food in an odd way. I think Steph and I were both very taken with Lindsey's idea for her CSA. I guess not an idea, because it's actually in practice.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it with Lindsey a little bit. We've talked about it on the podcast before. Neither of us are CSA members, and honestly, I would like to find one that is maybe a little closer to where I live and is a model that works for me, because the model that Lindsey has set up makes so much sense for someone who is, for me, just a household of one. And, you know, I can't eat a huge amount of fresh produce in a week without it going bad. And I love the idea of just being able to go to the farmer's market. I already have this kind of debit already paid, and I can get exactly what I'm hoping to cook that week and be able to use everything. And man, I might have to, I don't know, maybe if we get the entire Lancaster Farming team in her CSA, she'll give us a drop-off location here in Ephrata.
It's also a great idea, because I was thinking if you're entertaining one week
and
you can go to CSA and just, go nuts. Like maybe you're like, doubling, tripling, quadrupling your haul for the week because you've got company coming and you want to be able to serve them farm fresh food.
Yeah.
You're covered.
Very cool. And I mean, obviously I think her customers are getting some of that secondhand joy. I liked her story about even though I personally, I'm sorry everyone, I don't like tomatoes, but I loved her story of the customer trying a fresh tomato for the first time. So.
All right, so I think that wraps it up for us. Thank you all for listening. If you liked this episode, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you really like this episode, please consider leaving us a review.
If you have any questions or thoughts about this episode or about the podcast in general, you can email us at farmhouse@lancasterfarming.com.
You can also find us on social media at Lancaster Farming on most platforms.
Thank you again for listening and visiting us at the farmhouse. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Candace.
And we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
This episode of The Farmhouse is copyright 2024 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family.
It was written by Stephanie Spiker and Candace Wierzbowski. It was produced by Eric Herlock and also produced by Candace Wierzbowski and Stephanie Spiker, who pushed all the buttons.
And we did it very well, thank you.
The music you've heard throughout this episode is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.